So it has been a few years since both these consoles have came out. So now let's go and take a look at how the Xbox Series X compares against the Xbox Series S and see which specific console is better for you. Now, personally, I will definitely tell you, if money is not the issue, if you don't have any problem with affording any of these consoles or the availability of these consoles, the best thing you can do is just buy the Xbox Series X. I think that is by far the better console you can buy. It has everything you can probably do on any other console, and it just makes a lot more sense to purchase a console like that than buying a Series S. But there are still a lot of advantages of buying a Series S that we'll talk about throughout this video. And the first thing being is availability. I mean, it's still kind of a little bit hard to pick up both these consoles, but from everything that I've seen, buying a Series S is a little bit easier than buying a Series X. So if that is in your ballpark, if your area is pretty much the same thing too, I think you're in good hands buying an S as well. I don't really think there's that big of a difference. But if you remember what I said in 2020 when I originally bought these consoles, maybe you've never even heard of me before. Basically, I was saying that the overlap between, the next generation consoles, which were these ones, and from the older generations, the overlap is going to be extremely long. Just because of the pandemic and so many different things, because the Xbox One X was so powerful, because the PS4 Pro was so powerful, I don't think these game developers are going to just stop developing games for those older ones anytime soon. And we are still seeing a lot of games being cross-platform for not only different, for the Xboxes and PS4s and whatever, but a lot of them for Xbox Series X and the One X and even the One S. So those One generations and PS4 generations are going crazy. So when it comes down to these ones, even if you plan on waiting for like a year or two, you're still going to be perfectly fine. Now, another thing to keep in mind, and the biggest thing between both these consoles is with the actual peripherals, things you can plug in, and just features. The Xbox Series S does not have a disc slot. Now, personally, it may not be a big deal for a lot of people, but for me, it is kind of a big deal. I like having the ability of being able to just plug in a CD if I need to, and with that Xbox Series X, you can go ahead and play your last generation of console games too, and if you have an Xbox One X, if you didn't come from that Xbox One S that didn't have a disc slot, it's going to be hard to go ahead and port off all your games over to your Series S. I mean, if you downloaded them from the, Xbox store, then that's different, but if you didn't do that, you don't really have a feasible way of plugging it into this specific console. So it is kind of an annoying thing, I would say, for the Xbox Series S. And that is where the Series X, I would say, one of its biggest advantages are. With that specific console, you can plug in as many discs as you want to. I mean, like one at a time. But you can go ahead and just utilize not only your whole plethora of games that you currently own, even your last generation of games, but also in the future, if you're planning on buying used games, you can save a bunch of money that way. So even let's just say the Xbox Series X, you have to pay $500 for it or $600 or whatever. Let's say it's like twice the price of the Series S that you could have gotten. Well, over time, depending on how many games you buy, if you buy them in the used market, you can pretty much save a bunch of money. Or even if you go ahead and buy these games brand new and you go ahead and resell them later, that is another big thing you can do. You can just type in any game that you want to buy on eBay and you can see how much cheaper they are in the used market. It is one of the biggest things I would always recommend people to do, because nobody just wants to have these discs laying around anymore if you're not playing the games anymore. So that is personally one thing that I always love doing, is just looking at the Xbox, seeing, the future of these consoles. And personally, that is probably the biggest thing to keep in mind. However, I will tell you, for the Xbox Series S being in a much smaller form factor than the Series X, there are still lots of advantages for that console. It's much cheaper. If you don't really have a huge gaming library you already have, and if you're mostly just playing games like Fortnite or stuff, then this console is still perfectly more than capable enough of playing really any game you would ever imagine in your life. Now, both these consoles contain things you can game up to 120 frames per second. There's tons of games already available for them as of this point, and the internal storage is a little bit different for both. So if you're buying them brand new, the Xbox Series S comes at 512 gigabytes on that SSD. The Series X comes at 1 terabyte. So you are getting twice the amount of storage there, but a big thing to keep in mind is that you can always expand your storage later on. It's not really that crazy big of a thing. In terms of Microsoft's and Xbox's own website, the processing speeds are a little bit different as well. Now, I don't think it's really that big of a deal as they're trying to compare it here, but on the Series S, you can get 4 teraflops of processing power, where on the Series X, you're able to get 12 teraflops of processing power. So pretty much 3 times as powerful on the Series X than the Series S. but I will still say the Series S is way more capable than a lot of the other consoles or older consoles that are being sold as well. You can actually go out and export up to true 4K on the Xbox Series X, but you can go up to 1440p on the Series S. So if you're somebody who wants to get the highest capable graphics, well, the Series S may not be the one for you, but that doesn't mean that's like a bad console or anything. Like I said before, totally, completely not the case at all. Now, between both, interestingly enough, you're getting kind of the same port selection. So you're getting 3 USB 3.1 Gen 1 ports on both. You're getting an HDMI port as well, which is great. And you're getting, the Ethernet port on both, which is awesome as well. So that is a really big thing to keep in mind. The port selection is relatively almost the same. Interestingly enough, though, the Xbox Series S is less than half the weight than the Series X. So it is a much smaller console. So personally, I think if I were to go and pick up one of these, it would still be the Series X, which is, something to keep in mind. But the Series S is still a very capable machine there too. Now, if you're planning on buying these consoles in the monthly form factor monthly subscription from Microsoft, it is a $10 difference between them. So with the Series S, you're going to be paying $24.99 a month, and I think that includes the Xbox All Access, which includes Xbox Game Pass and a ton of other things as well. With the Xbox Series X, on the other hand, you were paying $34.99 for that console. So you were paying a little bit more money for that console over the Series S. Is it a big, ginormous deal? I don't really think so. I don't think it's like the most groundbreaking thing in the world. But if you're planning on saving the most amount of money, it may make a little bit of sense to get the Series S. So I think in 2022, both these consoles house a little bit of a different demographic. I will say, if you're brand new to the Xbox landscape and you don't plan on really buying any crazy games, maybe you're planning on just getting Xbox Game Pass and pretty much going from there, well, quite possibly the Series S is probably the perfect console. It's a perfect entry point, and even if you buy that console, and let's say you regret not being able to put discs in it or whatever, you can always go and just get pretty much every single game available for the Xbox within the Xbox store. So you can just go into the Xbox store, buy it or download the game there, and there are tons of free games available for Xboxes too. So it's not like you have to just buy and just depend on the ones you can buy there, and there are tons of last generation console games as well. So I will say, if you're in that demographic, the Series S is a really good console. But then I look at a console like the Series X, and this is the console for people who just want everything and want to future-proof themselves for as long as possible. I feel like the Series X is almost like what the Xbox One X was. Imagine if Microsoft released the Xbox One X when they originally announced the Xbox One. I feel like that's what Microsoft is kind of doing here. Like, yeah, the next generation Xboxes are going to be crazy, but the Series X is already a really powerful console, and I'll be curious to see what happens in the next few years if they make like a Xbox Series X2 or whatever. But these are powerful consoles, and if you're somebody who plans on just, throwing everything you can on an Xbox, then probably this is the best one for you. It's a little bit more expensive, and I think it's a little bit harder to buy in most areas. But I still think, man, if you can go and just get an Xbox Series X, that is the better way to go. But I still loved my Series S. I loved that console a lot, and I had a great time with it. I just think both these consoles kind of suffer in the same thing, which I won't get into this video, but I still think if you're wanting to get the best value per dollar, the Series S is probably the best short-term value, that you could buy. But I think long-term, it probably still makes a lot more sense to buy Series X, especially if you have a huge, library of games that you've already are playing with. So that's pretty much how I'd kind of sum it up, to be honest. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. If you want to buy either one of these consoles, like I said before, this will also be linked down below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.